Jonathan Nelson. He's the founder of Hackers and Founders. Have you guys heard about it? It is the largest community of early tech founders in Silicon Valley. How many of you here go to a tech university? How many of you are geeks? Come on, geeks.
Is there a geek in the house?
Oh.
Is there someone who codes in the house? That's right, represent my nerd brothers.
Woo!
Is there a remote in the house? No remote control for the slides? Excellent. Thank you guys very much for inviting us here to Lithuania. Oh my God, I love Vilnius. I went last night to this thing and I saw on the menu, it was meat on a pitchfork, and I was like, I must. It was truly an epic meal, and Tim West, the chef, the culinary master, truly one of the most amazing meals I've ever had in my life was with Tim and one of his friends, and I'm just saying, dude, Tim slept last night. He did not go to dinner. But I love this town. Thank you guys very much for having us, and thank you to all these students. I'm very excited to turn a slide. Oh, hi. My name is Jonathan Nelson. 5 years ago, I came to Silicon Valley with this crazy little idea that it was just going to take me a long time to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And 6 months into this process, I was working 3 nights a week at a hospital, coding 4 nights a week. And my wife said, honey, I love you. Get out of the house, please. 1 night a month and talk to other people about this. So I started this little group called Hackers and Founders. And my first Hackers and Founders event was 4 guys and me in a bar talking about startups. Next month, it was 8 people. Next month, it was 23, 32. We now have a mailing list of 8,000 people in Silicon Valley. Last Thursday in San Francisco, we had 350 people in a bar for 5 hours. And it was all just getting together and talking about technology and entrepreneurship and building startups and all try to help each other out. There's now 25 other chapters or friendly organizations around the world that meet in bars and talk about startups. And sadly, I have heard that people in Lithuania don't like beer or something, and there is no Hackers and Founders chapter in Lithuania. So if anybody wants to start one, let me know. What I'm going to talk to today is about small teams plus code, plus dedication, plus time. A lot of times just equals awesome things. I'm a nerd. This is awkward. My 9th grade year of high school, I lived overseas. I came to the United States and I went to this boarding school. In the United States, we have something called a wedgie. Anybody know what a wedgie is? Thank you. It's when you're small. I was small back then. I was the youngest and smallest person in the school. And the big sports team players, because I'm a nerd, I got bigger later and I'm still a nerd, but I was very small and the big sports players thought it was kind of fun to pick on the young nerds, so they would grab my underwear and pull it up. That's a wedgie. I got 64 of them that year and I counted them. Thank you. So needless to say, I was a little shy and a little awkward, and but the weird thing is I ended up spending a lot of my youth in front of a computer, like geeking out, nerding out, because computers loved me and they didn't give me wedgies. But the weird thing is that using a computer and using digital technologies and being really good at it gives you an enormous amount of leverage. And right now, what I think is unique is happening in the world, and I think a handful of people are starting to see this. But this idea, this crazy idea that Silicon Valley promises the world, it's the Silicon Valley story of two dudes in a garage build something awesome. It's getting to the point now where two dudes could be in, I don't know, an apartment in Vilnius. Or dude is gender neutral in Silicon Valley. They're lady dudes, dude dudes. So I'm just saying, dude is officially gender neutral. Two people can be trying to start a business, trying to start a startup, but if you actually use digital technologies, the amount of leverage that you get is amazing. So I'm going to tell a handful of stories of a couple of dudes. The first is this guy. He loved collecting comic books and loved collecting things. His wife loved to collect little candy dispensers. And back in 1994, he started this little discussion group, and it was basically just to talk about collecting things. And a bunch of people were on his website. They talked about collecting things and this and that. And you think, oh, hey, you know what? I actually have the little, Star Wars candy dispenser. If you need the Yoda dispenser, I'll trade you the Yoda dispenser for the Wookiee Yoda dispenser, whatever. And so they started trading things on this site. This dude is a total nerd. He named his site after the Ebola virus. And he made this little company called eBay. For the longest time, Pierre Omidyar couldn't get anybody to pay attention to him. He started his site in 1994. He walked around Silicon Valley building this site for about 3 years. I believe his first investment came in 1998. He had people, I was talking with Chris McCann, they brought in somebody, he made a platform so that people could buy and sell and trade collectibles, comic books, candy dispensers. They got so overwhelmed with people doing this that they hired someone to come on board as a CFO, and they showed him a table. And there was a bunch of envelopes on the table. And the CFO said, "What's in those envelopes?" And Pierre said, "Oh, that's money. Like, those are checks that people have written to us for, like, their trading, and I just don't have time to get to them." He opened up the checks. There was $500,000. But they had found something obscure that really only nerds liked. It was this tiny little niche. There was only a handful of people. It was Pierre and a couple of friends who were really serving these needs that nobody else saw for comic book collectors, people who love to collect candy dispensers, all of this sort of stuff. eBay now makes about $6 to $8 billion a year in profit. It's still one of the unsexiest companies in Silicon Valley. Everybody's like, oh God, eBay. They're making bank. In English, that means they're making a lot of money. But it was really a nerd with some code. He tried to raise money, I believe, for a year and a half, was unsuccessful. His first investment was $8 million in 1998. When checks were just falling off of trees in Silicon Valley and anyone with half an idea could get investment money. He tried really hard. He had an actual company with actual customers that were paying him money, and he was having a hard time raising money. But he ended up doing it. He IPO'd, and obviously it's doing very well. Another nerd friend of mine, his name is Gabe. Gabe is in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. He hates flying. He hates getting on planes. He's been to Silicon Valley in the last 5 years once. I really want him to come out and speak at one of our events. We do like 1 to 3 events in Silicon Valley every single week. I would love to have him come out and speak, but he's like, dude, no, I hate flying. I'm not going to get on a plane, no. He lives in the middle of woods outside of Philadelphia. And Gabe had this crazy idea. He built one company. He'd sold it, so he had some spare cash. He wanted to be Mr. Mom. His wife was out working, so he would take care of the kids. And Gabe said, you know what? I'm going to build a search engine. Why not? So for about 4 or 5 years, Gabe built a search engine. At home, a good friend of mine did his design work, went over there to visit him in his house, and he had in a closet, he had several racks of servers, along with a little baby fence to keep his 4-year-old children from playing in the servers. He also used online tools, cloud technologies, to do this. And kind of his thing was, he's really, very, he thinks that privacy is extremely important to people and should be extremely important to people. And so when you actually search on his search engine, which is called duckduckgo.com, it's a terrible name, but Gabe thinks that he shouldn't track you when you're going around on his search engine. Like if you go on Google's website, when you go around on Google's website, Google sees what you're looking for all the time, and then they say, hey, so-and-so is looking for Yoda candy dispenser heads. Let me serve so-and-so with ads for eBay and these particular sales on eBay, and that's how Google makes its money. Gabe really doesn't like the fact of tracking people, so he purposefully chooses to not collect any of that information on his company. When I introduced him to a couple of investors last year, he was getting 7 million people coming to his website every month to search for different things, and he was one engineer and a bunch of servers stacked in his basement. He'd been working at it for 4 or 5 years, and if you think about the beginning of Google, Google was 2 engineers. It took them about $30 million in investment money to kind of get up and get going. They have data centers. They are probably the largest supercomputing organization in the world, and that's what they do. They have massive and massive and massive data centers. Gabe is actually trying to compete with Google. This is a sign on Highway 101, which is the largest highway between Silicon Valley and San Francisco. Everybody goes past this, and Gabe, his one engineer self, throws this sign up saying, Google, psht. Google tracks you, they're all of your information. If privacy is important to you, use duckduckgo.com. He's doing quite well. He finally just raised investment money last year. He now has about 10 employees, and he's actively trying to compete with Google. Why? That's kind of silly. If he can get 1% of all the people in the world to use his search engine, that 1% is worth $100 million in revenue a year. I'll say that again. 1% of the search engine market is worth $100 million in revenue a year. Not so stupid anymore, is he? If he as one person can actually start trying to challenge huge companies like that because he knows code and because he has some time on his hands, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? Me. 4 years ago, there were 4 guys and me in a bar. The next month, it was 8 guys and me in a bar. A few weeks after that, 15 guys and me in a bar. At the time, I want to be sure I don't go over my time here. At the time, this was never intended to be a business. I really wanted to build a search engine for financial news. You know why? Because if you can capture 1% of the search engine market, that's worth $100 million a year, right? I'm throwing this idea to you guys. But this community kept on growing and growing and growing around us, and I kept on hearing these people with all of these problems starting their businesses, and oh my gosh, Jonathan, I just landed here from Latvia, and I met my co-founder who just came from Anchorage, and we're here to start a startup. And I'd be like, awesome. Want a beer? Like, hey, do you know any investors? I'd be like, yeah, no. Like, no, you need to start an incubator. And I was like, dude, I work in a hospital 3 nights a week. I save lives occasionally and do a lot of cleaning of ugly, nasty things. They're like, no, 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 start an incubator. So a bunch of people, after a long time, kind of convinced us to start an incubator. And we're still very focused on like this grassroots community of just doing what helps the people around us. But we have a huge mailing list. I've only quit my job 5 months ago. I've been raising money for about a year and a half. The first checks that we got just landed about 6 weeks ago. So I can pay rent this month. Yes. Let's hear. Yeah, thank you, thank you. Let's hear it for rent. Woo! Weird things happen, though, when you are now a community organizer of the largest community of nerds starting startups in Silicon Valley. We have a mailing list of 8,000 people, and all of a sudden, people start asking me, dude, what are we going to do about this terrible law called SOPA, PIPA? And there was another meetup organization in New York who started sending us emails saying, what are you guys doing in Silicon Valley, you bunch of weaklings? Are you scaredy cats? We're going to throw a protest in front of Senator Schumer's office. I was like, really? So people started emailing me repeatedly saying we need to do something about this. And so I said, all right, let's do something about this. I went and I Googled, how do I organize a protest? Swear to God, that's how it happened. I went to the hardware store. I got a couple of stools and some cardboard. I rented a microphone, that one. And we stood up on the microphone, stood up on there, and we had a mic, and we said, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how to throw a protest, but I would much rather be starting a business. And how many people here know how to code? And everybody was, how many people here raising startups? Everybody raised their hands. And I said, how many of you would rather be building your companies than having to protest a law that's going to quite possibly break how the internet works? And everybody was like this. Then people like the Mozilla Foundation show up. My friend Chris McCann shows up. Craig Newmark from this little company called Craigslist shows up. Ron Conway, he brings MC Hammer. And the guy who started the Internet Archive, he shows up. The Electronic Frontier Foundation shows up. Katarina Fake, who built this company called Flickr and sold it to Yahoo for $150 million, she shows up. And all of a sudden, it's like a thing. I was shocked. I'd never done anything like this. But it's the power of small people who are dedicated, who spend time, who use technology tools like mailing lists. I now have a mailing list of 8,000 people interested in starting businesses. I met the director of the US Patent Office 4 weeks ago. Why? Because I have a mailing list and I know thousands of young entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and we're trying to help them, and the US Patent Office needs help on that. I was invited to a White House summit on immigration. Why? Because I've had beer with a lot of people who need visas and who are trying to start companies. So when I say, no, fix this, you can have thousands of companies be started in the United States, they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, dude, like, how do you know this? I'm like, because there are thousands. We have 25,000 people in chapters around the world who are interested in startups, and half of them would love to come to Silicon Valley, but they can't. Like, if your economy sucks, like, fix it by letting these people start companies here. And they're like, oh. Because, you know, we had this big investor of this $1 billion fund. He showed up, and he said that he needed 6 visas for his portfolio companies. And we figured, you know, he's importing cheap entrepreneurs from overseas. I'm like, oh. So you guys actually have a huge advantage here. You guys have an amazing history of being technical, math, science, physics. You guys have an economy. You guys have better internet than I do. I'm really pissed about this. You guys have time, resources, potential. You have, why not? Why would you not try to build a company? I don't know. Think about that. And you guys have the rest of your life. honestly, I mean, I love talking with college students because you're at that point in your life where you decide, what do I do? I'm not saying that entrepreneurship or building a startup is easy. It's not. Before we got our first investor check 6 weeks ago, I had a little meltdown. I had a little moment. I had a little cry. Just because I'm big doesn't mean I can't cry. This shit's really hard. It is. But at the same time, you meet awesome people. I met Tim a year and a half ago, and he and I have been friends ever since. Why? Because he's awesome. I fully expect within the next year to see people that came up here and speak in the New York Times. Why? Because the kind of people who are crazy enough to build companies, the kind of people who are crazy enough, like Jen said, to go on heroes quests, and build companies and build startups. These are the crazy people who are crazy enough who discover new technologies, who build new companies. Last thing, and I'll go, is I read an article 3 days ago that said in the last 15 years, there have been $1 billion software company started every 3 months. A $1 billion software company is started globally in the next 3 months. I would love to triple that number. I would love to see a $1 billion software company start in Lithuania. There's no reason why it shouldn't. It just takes small teams, a lot of hard work, time, code, and you can make it awesome. Thanks.